Sorry, it's DJ.
Good day everyone, I am Ronabel Avisado and the assigned topic to me is all about research hypotheses and assumptions. I know that you have already an idea about what is hypothesis, and now I am going to define what is hypothesis. Hypothesis is considered as an intelligent guess or prediction that gives directional to the researcher to answer the research question. Hypotheses are defined as the formal statement of the tentative or expected prediction or explanation of the relationship between two or more variables in a specified population. A hypothesis is a formal tentative statement of the expected relationship between two or more variables under study. A hypothesis helps to translate the research problem and objective into a clear explanation or prediction of the expected results or outcomes of the study. Hypothesis is derived from the research problems, literature review, and conceptual framework. Hypothesis is a research project logically follow literature review and conceptual framework. So, yung hypothesis is, ito yung mga guess or predictions natin about sa research natin na nanggaling sa SOP natin. Halimbawa dun sa research namin na the effects of reading strategies for increasing students' level of comprehension. Yung hypothesis namin doon is there is a significant relationship between the profile of the respondents and their level of comprehension. So, dito, napipredict namin at saka ito yung parang guess namin na mangyayari sa research namin na galing mismo doon sa SOP namin. Dito, sa hypothesis din is tinitignan yung relationship between sa two variables. Hypothesis makes the following contribution in research study, and it provides clarity to the research problem and research objectives. It describes, explains, or predicts the expected result or outcome of the research. It indicates the types of research design. It directs the research study process. It identifies the population of the research study that is to be investigated or examined. It facilitates data collection, data analysis, and data interpretation. So there are types of hypotheses. They are the research hypothesis, null hypothesis, and the testable hypothesis. So for the research hypothesis, under of it is the associative hypothesis, causal hypothesis, non-directional hypothesis, directional hypothesis, complex hypothesis, and the simple hypothesis. Then from the null hypothesis, they are the simple hypothesis, complex hypothesis, causal hypothesis, and the associative null hypothesis. So number 1 is research hypothesis. So under of it is simple hypothesis. Simple hypothesis predicts that there exists a relationship between the independent variable and dependent variable. In simple hypothesis, there is a relationship between the two variables. For example, in our research hypothesis, there is a significant relationship between the profile of the respondents and their level of comprehension. The next is the complex hypothesis. Complex hypothesis predicts that there exists relationship between two or more independent and dependent variable. In this complex hypothesis, there are two or more variables involved. So, for example, there is significant relationship between the profile of the respondents, the academic performance of the respondents, and the level of comprehension of the students. The next is directional hypothesis. Directional hypothesis predicts the direction of the relationship between the independent and dependent variable. Example of directional hypothesis is high quality of nursing education will lead to high quality of nursing practice skills. Then, Non-directional hypothesis. Non-directional hypothesis predicts the relationship between the independent variable and dependent variable but does not specify the directional relationship.
For example, teacher-student relationship influence students' learning.
Then next is the causal hypothesis. Causal hypothesis predicts cause and effects relationship or interaction between the independent variable and dependent variable. This hypothesis predicts the effect of the independent variable on the dependent variable. In this, the independent variable is the experimental or treatment variable. The dependent variable is the outcome variable.
An example of causal hypothesis is early postoperative ambulation will lead to prompt recovery.
Then, the associative hypothesis. Associative hypothesis predicts an associative relationship between the independent variable and the dependent variable. When there is a change in any one of the variables, changes also occurs in the other variable. The associative relationship between the independent and dependent variables may have either positive association and negative association. The number 2 types of hypothesis is the null hypothesis. So null hypothesis is also called statistical hypothesis because this type of hypothesis is used for statistical testing and statistical interpretation. The null hypothesis predicts that there is no relationship between the independent variable and dependent variable. So for example, in our research, yung sabi ko kanina, na there is a significant relationship between the profile of the respondents and their level of comprehension. So, dito kapag nagbigay ka ng isang null hypothesis, yung example na yon is magiging there is no significant relationship between the profile of the respondents and their level of comprehension. So, sa null hypothesis, walang relationship between the two variables. Then its type is simple null hypothesis, complex null hypothesis, causal null hypothesis, associative null hypothesis, which is defined earlier. The next is the testable hypothesis. The testable hypothesis predicts relationship between the independent variable and the dependent variable, and these variable are testable or measurable. So, dito sa testable hypothesis, yun na nga, merong relationship between the two variables at saka testable at saka measurable siya. The next is the assumption. Assumption are the statement of the basic principle or facts that are established and are universally accepted as true on the basis of logic or reasoning without verification or proof, though they may not have been scientifically tested. Assumption is picked up by the research from various sources. These sources are previous research studies, theories, clinical fields, etc. So, an assumption is a belief that forms one of the bases of the research. This belief is not be tested or supported with empirical data, while the hypothesis is a tentative answer to a research question, but a hypothesis can be an assumption. Then my reflection hypothesis helps to provide link to the underlying theory and specific research questions. So it helps us, especially us as our researchers, in data analysis and measure the validity and reliability of the research. It provides a basis or evidence to prove the validity of the research.